I am Brad Keelor. He is Silas Nichols. Next on Director's Cut, find out what has changed the most at FHWA in his career there. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, I sit down with a different GI member who tells us, well, about themselves. They tell us stories about their lives. Some of them are personal, some are professional. All of them are fun. If you like what you see today, you will want to do two things in this order. You will want to click subscribe, you will want to click get notifications, and we will let you know every single time we post something to the GI YouTube channel. If you do not know anything about the Geo-Institute, you can visit geoinstitute.org. At that site, you will find out that we are a technical society composed mainly of geotechnical engineers and or geologists. We have about 12,000 members, and we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And this week we welcome, not from Washington, D.C., but on location from Charleston, South Carolina.
Columbia, actually.
Columbia, South Carolina. See how I just did that smoothly? The principal geotechnical engineer from the Federal Highway Administration. It is Silas Nichols. Silas, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So we have 10 questions on Director's Cut, same as every week, and there are two that we ask every single guest, and one of those is how we kick off, and that is describe your job in 45 seconds.
The good news is I can describe it in less than that. So as principal geotechnical engineer, I sit in as part of a very, very small, highly technical team. I have responsibility for direction and leadership for the National Geotechnical Team, which is about 30 of us, 10 of us on the federal aid side. I generally manage strategic plans, interact with industry, coordinate with ASCEs, state DOTs, provide technical assistance on complex projects, and support policy and regulation in the office I sit in the Office of Bridges and Structures at Federal Highways.
That was great. You definitely did it in under 45 seconds. We don't judge anybody on the length of their answer there, but you did a great job. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the construct of that team as we go through the interview here. But we have to ask fun questions on Director's Cut, and that's where we go next. I don't know that people think of Washington, D.C. as a crazy place. It's, you know, people look at it from the outside. It seems very buttoned up and put together. But for all you New Yorkers out there, you don't have a monopoly on nuts. So we have to ask, what is the craziest thing that you've ever seen while walking down the street in Washington, D.C.?
So you told me you were going to ask me this question. And I found myself stumped, and I couldn't figure out why until somebody let me know that I've probably come to just pretty much normalize everything that I see on a daily basis, that things that I just think are normal probably appear really crazy to other people. And so I was putting together just a small list of things I've seen just in the last, decade or so here, just wandering around. Couple of months ago, we were sitting outside at a relatively nice restaurant on Pennsylvania Avenue, just immediately east of the Supreme Court in the Capitol. And an Uber Eats driver pulls up, gets out of his car, runs into the restaurant to pick up an order. And while he's in there, some guy just casually walks off the sidewalk, gets into his car and drives off. His car was literally stolen in front of a crowd of people, and nobody saw what happened. We saw it. We saw the police come up. We were asked a bunch of questions. We pointed out the security cameras, and we went on about our meal. I'm pretty sure that's crazy. But I don't know. Washington, D.C. is a unique town. So the protests and marches are, some of them are extreme, but they happen all of the time. Presidents just showing up in your neighborhood for no apparent reason. So during his tenure, Barack Obama was just wandering around, stopped at the Five Guys across the street from our office. A couple of weeks ago, Joe Biden was shopping for a gift for Kamala about a block from our house, and we got to see that. The number of, I live on Capitol Hill, so just the number of quote unquote celebrities that we run into on a daily basis. Yeah. I was sitting at a bar in a restaurant the other day, and there was an astronaut sitting 2 seats down from me, Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. But people that live close enough to us that we see them on a pretty regular basis include like Lindsey Graham and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I've run into Ruth Bader Ginsburg on airplanes and in the airport, and Lisa Murkowski and Neil Gorsuch. There was the Obama inauguration here, which I don't know if you were here for the Obama inauguration, but that was surreal. Not a situation where all of the interstates were closed because they needed them for bus parking. So NBA All-Star Weekend, MLB All-Star Weekend, both of those were crazy here. Some of it is pretty unique to Washington. Some of it's common to most major cities, but I think it took me a while to sort of think about an answer to that, because strange things happen, and I just don't really pay that much attention to it.
And I think you named some good ones. An NBA All-Star Weekend 2001, I think, is one of the great ones. For some reason, I decided to go to a McDonald's on Georgia Avenue near Howard with a bunch of my friends. And there were all these guys who were clearly from out of town, like cruising Georgia Avenue in these ridiculous cars, holding up traffic. And it was really memorable for me. And that's been, 20 years. And then I think you're right about getting desensitized to a lot of this stuff, too, because you just... whenever I'm in another city and the president is there and they shut down freeways for it, I'm always like... Sometimes we don't even know. Like, we'll see it on TV that the president was in our area that day. Yeah.
It's just, it's a part of our everyday life. NBA All-Star Weekend, I was most struck by the number of limousines and
it was crazy.
Just exotic cars that were running around downtown. It didn't make sense that there were that many of them in the Washington, D.C. area.
But like I said, I will never forget that. That is probably my most memorable McDonald's experience of my life, was NBA All-Star Weekend 2001. Yeah. So now we got to get to the question that we teased a little bit in the open here. You've been at FHWA a little over 20 years now. And a lot of things have changed, both, politically, but technically, scientifically, in the engineering community during that time as well. What's been the most dramatic transition or change at FHWA that you've seen in your 20 years?
So I think there are two things here that really fit this answer. One that's internal to FHWA, one that is more focused on the discipline and the construction industry as a whole. I guess I'll start with us. I think it's really just the way our role has changed over 20 years as an agency, and in our roles and responsibilities in engaging with our transportation partners, namely the state departments of transportation. The way that we deliver projects, the way that we deliver programs, the way that we fund programs has changed the way that we resource technical expertise. It's changed the way that we engage with our partners. And that really has changed the way that we think about the type of service that we're able to provide, the types of products that we have to develop, the way that we have to engage with industry partners like the Geo-Institute and others. So I think that's been as dramatic as any, and it's happened sort of slowly over the 20 years. The second one has been seemingly in the blink of an eye, and it's really the evolution of the discipline as a whole. And I don't think we, Federal Highways, have been nimble enough, or as nimble as we need to be, to address some of these changes that are happening in what seems like the blink of an eye. So things like foundation type and size, they're getting much bigger, much deeper. Materials are becoming much more exotic, and we're trying to catch up with that. Technology, a lot of the extraterrestrial ways that we can now view geotechnical issues has created a different way of sort of thinking about the way that we go forward. The commoditization of the discipline, and then just the maturity of the discipline, which I think is related to that, makes it such that everything is a little bit different, but we still seem to be dragging some ideas from, generations ago with us. So, the way that we think about education has changed, but has it? The way that we think about professional opportunity has changed, but has it? The way that we think about research, roles and responsibilities, all of it is a little bit different. And I think those changes are really stretching what we are having to think about doing and what we're able to do to meet the needs of the discipline, both in transportation and more broadly our needs. So I think those are the two biggest areas that I would sort of think about there.
I think that's great insight for a lot of people in the community who have probably never thought about things that way. And I don't know, honestly, whether people expect federal agencies or state agencies in this case to be the leader, or if they expect you guys to kind of sit back and wait and let the market figure things out, and then you guys kind of step in and draw up the policy for whatever. The other question I wanted to ask you about this is, you recently hit your 20 years, and we were talking before the interview about that. What's your advice for people coming out of school, newly minted PhDs or master's students? I think sometimes there are a lot of people who do want to move around from job to job just to do it, or they think that's the way they're going to get ahead. As somebody who's been there so long, what do you say to that?
So, I think there's a lot of pieces of advice, and I don't think I change it all the time. I think I just give a different portion of the advice every all the time. I think there are a couple of things that I try to tell students whenever I'm talking to students all of the time, and I try to be consistent in it. The first one is communicate. Just no matter what you are doing, work on your communication skills, both oral and written. If you can't express in a competent way with clarity what's in your head, it isn't of much value to anyone. And so that's first. With regard to how to progress in your career, the one thing, tying back to the most dramatic changes, I think the thing in geotechnical engineering that's been most interesting to me is that it has broadened. The profession has broadened in a way that there are a lot more ways to be successful in the discipline than there have ever been. And there are ways being generated over and over and over again. If you look at something as simple as digs, which is now infrastructure housed with you guys, that's a job creator. It's a profession expander. It's creating different opportunities for geotechnical engineers to be successful within the discipline in a way that we really would have never thought of even 15 years ago. So I think the message I would give to students would be, figure out what makes you happy, what you really like to do. Don't worry about geotechnical engineering. That'll sort itself out. But figure out what makes you happy and what you really want to do, and find a culture that will let you be that. And if you're there for 20 plus years, that's okay. And if you're there for 3 years and you decide that's not right for you, that's okay. But I think the goal is to continue to find ways to really excel at areas that are interesting to you and that you are good at.
That is great advice. And all you students out there, you can write that down and go forth with it. So I think someday when somebody makes the Silas Nichols story, whether it's in print or in film, one thing that will have to be in there is golfing. How did you start golfing? Have you always loved it? Is it something you got into as an adult? Is it something you got into unwillingly and then learned to love? What's your golf story?
So I should preface this with, I hate golf. I hate it. I've tried to quit the game over and over and over again. And I hate it. I blame my father for this. So when I was a child, I used to take clubs from my father's golf bag, steal balls from his bag, and our house abutted a big farm. And so I could go into the backyard and just hit golf balls into the empty field and then go chase them down and bring them back. And so that's how I learned how to swing a club. But I didn't really start playing golf until I was in my 20s, well after college. And it's something I can do a lot. It's something I wish I enjoyed more because I'm just bad at it. But I love to go to the golf course every day, so I do.
Still a fantastic answer. I like that. And I think people will be surprised, because if I sat down and made a list of things about Silas, golf would be on that list. So that's really great.
It should be. If I had more time down here in South Carolina, I'd have been on the course today because it's 75 degrees. So
yeah, not in balmy DC today. We got a lot of rain. So I think another interesting aspect of your job, and I've been in the same situation, is that you're part of a team that's scattered. You guys are all over the U.S. And so I wondered, what is your geotech family like at DOT and FHWA? What's your strategy? How do you guys stay connected and make sure that you're a cohesive unit?
So I think the most interesting thing that most people don't realize is how small the geotechnical team is at Federal Highways. Total geotechnical engineers in Federal Highways is right around 30. And the majority of them sit in our federal lands offices. And our federal lands office is a little bit like a Department of Transportation. They manage projects for all of the federally owned lands around the country. So I don't get to interact with them as much as I would like, because they actually have billable work to do. On the federal aid side, which is the side that most external people see, we are responsible for trainings and reference manuals and research oversight and things like that. There are only 9 of us. So there are 5 technical consultants, we'll call them, that sit in the resource centers. There are field staff that are the first line of technical assistance for state departments of transportation. We have 2 people in research that manage all of our research activities, one on the materials side, one on the structural side. And then we have 2 people in headquarters, myself and Hala Muhammad, who sits with me. And we essentially manage the national program. And I think, for such a small team, really the 9 of us that spend the most time together, we are connected by necessity. There isn't another way to do this. We are flat in our expertise. We have just about everybody has expertise in something that somebody else on the team does not have expertise in, which allows us to share roles and responsibilities across the offices in a different way. So for instance, I have I have Jennifer Nix here with me. She's actually virtual, but she's working this project with me from the research side, even though it is a program item. So yeah, it's by necessity. There just isn't another way for us to get stuff done if we can't figure out a way to distribute responsibility across the expertise in a small group like this.
Still a good answer, though, because I think that was one thing that was shocking to me when I went into my last job. I had never been in that situation where everybody wasn't just in one facility all the time. And I mean, in some ways, I think COVID's made it easier because of the increase in technologies like we're recording this in right now. But it's something still tricky about all being in different locations and figuring out how to be a unit like that.
So we try. I mean, before COVID and starting again this year, we try to do, one face-to-face at a minimum with the federal aid side. So the 9 of us annually for strategic planning purposes, for business meeting purposes. And we are trying to do a second meeting annually. At the moment, it generally moves to either every 2 years or every 3rd year that we get the entire group of 30 of us together. Just because it's very difficult to schedule with federal lands. But we do what we can to try and get together face-to-face on a regular basis to also just help with people knowing what each other looks like and having some social interactions.
It's a big deal. So the other question that we ask everybody when they come on the show, And you're going to have a little bit of a unique twist to this, and you might end up with another bonus question. Is how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
I honestly don't remember. I am sure.
Was that important of a moment in your life?
I am sure it happened during my undergraduate time at Syracuse. I'm nearly positive it happened there. I wasn't all that active. I mean, I would go to whatever local meetings on a somewhat periodic basis whenever I could. When I got to Boston, that's a pretty involved chapter up there, and so I went to a few meetings up there, but I wasn't what you would consider involved. It wasn't really until I got to Federal Highways that we started to really explore our relationship as a partnership with the Geo-Institute and ASCE, and we've looked for a number of different ways here over the last few years to I mean, exploit's the wrong word, and it gives sort of a negative connotation, but to exploit.
We don't have much to exploit either. I'd like to point that, at least in financial resources.
Yeah, to exploit our relationship with the Geo-Institute, and so we now have a relationship that allows us to get into agreements with you guys to share resources and to share administrative responsibilities on certain things, and do a lot of things that allow us to be better at distributing information, and we hope allows you to be better at aggregating information for your membership. So I think today's relationship, which for me started back in 2002-ish or something like that, is much stronger and more involved than it ever was before I got to Federal Highways.
So the follow-up question that I have to ask is, as a government employee, in your case specifically as a federal employee, what makes you renew that membership every year? Because we do hear from a lot of federal and state employees, well, I can't justify it. I'll get my stuff from ASCE some other way because it'll just come into the office. What's the value to you of being an ASCE or GI member?
I think the value to me is just in the networking and in the sort of knowledge sharing. It is, I mean, your professional society is the largest for geotechnical engineers right now. It has the ability to provide me access not only to subject matter experts in areas that can help me better inform what our strategic planning is going to look like, but it also allows me access to people who are doing the bulk of the work for my partners. So all of that consulting work and outsourced work for design and construction of bridges and other structures on highways around the country is mostly done by GI members if they're not being designed and built in-house. And we just don't do a lot of design and build in-house anymore in the country. So to have that kind of access so that we can get messaging out to that group of people, and we can also receive feedback from people, I think is really important. And I think, if you got nothing else out of membership in a professional society, the networking, the relationships, the connections are probably the most important thing. I mean, it's no different than belonging to a fraternity in college, right, or belonging to the Boy Scouts as a child, right?
That's true, and we're doing our best to bring everybody back together. Hopefully we'll see everybody in Charlotte. It's going to be a good time. Or at one of our regional events. Should plug those too. So you're from New Hampshire. I don't know how many people around the country have met anyone from New Hampshire. I mean, they've met you probably, but it's a little state for those people who aren't from the East Coast. It's just one of those that's kind of out east somewhere. What is something about New Hampshire that you think everyone needs to know?
Yeah, tiny state. Most people can't figure out if it's the one that faces up or faces down in New England. We're the one with the little tiny top and the wide bottom. And it's a small state. I mean, it crossed 1 million citizens when I was a sophomore in college. And I'm not even going to give you the demographics. I'm just going to tell you it wasn't a very diverse state when I was growing up. So, but physically, it's got everything. I mean, it's got beaches and mountains and lakes and 4 seasons. I mean, if you're an outdoor person, you're going to find whatever you're looking for in the state. And by all accounts, it is gorgeous. I mean, everywhere you go in the state is beautiful, whether it's summer, fall and foliage season, winter and snow caps. It's just a gorgeous day.
I think the first time I went there, I was 9 years old. I went to visit my aunt and uncle, and the two biggest things I remembered were they had a lake near their house. We went swimming, and the water was completely clear. You could go to the deepest point in the lake and you could see the bottom, and I had never really experienced that before. And the other thing was, because this was in July, that the sun came up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had never experienced that, living on the extreme western edge of the time zone. And so the whole week I woke up at 4 o'clock every day and could not go back to sleep. Do you just get used to it? How does your body adjust to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've known anything else. So we moved to New Hampshire when I was 10. And I was there until I was in my late 20s. So I don't know. It's what I know.
It was amazing. Like that was so shocking to me, because I guess at that point in my life, in my childhood, it had never occurred to me that was like a thing. Like, even if it's a fact that when you experience it the first time, it's totally different. So.
Yeah.
So I have to ask one more question about you and about your team at FHWA. I know, having been not a generalist position, but in a similar kind of job when I was working for the British government, it was tough to stay on top of everything happening in the community, because you're not out there taking on these projects the way that a lot of our members are. What's your day-to-day strategy for staying on top of everything that happens out there in the geotech world?
Oh, some form of chaos game theory, crisis management. I don't know. I would tell you, I don't believe I have one. It doesn't matter what plan I have. It seems to get upended every single day I walk into the office. So, and then it's just a reaction to what happened that day. So, the most recent thing to have happened that has upended our office was obviously the bridge collapse in Pittsburgh. Right. It turns out it's not a geotechnical issue, so it's nothing I have to worry about, but it is all hands on deck when it happens. And generally it upends not just that day, but it upends several days to months. And now, whatever it is you were planning to do has to sort of take a side seat or a back seat to the most important thing that's going on. So sometimes it's a bridge collapse, sometimes it's an infrastructure bill, sometimes it's just somebody from Congress wandering through the halls asking really weird questions. But, the bigger picture is that both Jennifer Nix and I maintain strategic roadmaps, one for research, one for my office in the program side. And they're designed to look forward to what we think are the anticipated needs of the transportation community and then the discipline as a whole. And, part of our engagement with societies like the Geo-Institute is that the plan is informed from input from just as many sources as we can get. We are visible because we are informed by our DOTs, our division offices, industry, consulting, academics. If we can find ways to really think about where we need to go as a group from a research and a development standpoint, we're trying to get after that. And so I think the day-to-day strategy is to continue to execute and oversee research, development, and implementation activities that fit within what our anticipated roadmap would look like to fit the focus areas that we think are important to the community.
That's great. I think those three answers about your team and about your role, I think that's really inside FHWA for a lot of our viewers. They're really going to enjoy that. Maybe you'll get some follow-up questions. So we got two left here. Well, one big one here is that you are the Cross USA lecturer for 2021-2022. If people do not know anything about the Cross USA lecturer program, we started it about 12 years ago now. And the goal is to bring a national level lecturer out to our chapters, whether it's student chapters, professional chapters, and it doesn't matter whether it's a large chapter like our Philadelphia one or a smaller one that's in a more remote area. We want to be able to give them the same quality presentations. So Silas is our lecturer this year, and we were talking about this a little before we started to record. You've started to get a lot of presentations lined up now. What is the most exciting thing for you about being the Cross USA lecturer this year?
This is exciting. And for those of you under the age of 30, yes, I was raising the roof. I know you don't know what that means, but I'm an old person. I am excited about this, and we have started scheduling. And I think, one of the things I truly love about this job is the opportunity to travel a lot and to see a lot of things, a lot of different places and cultures, and experience things that I had never had the opportunity to experience before. And also to have really good discussions with really smart people who are everywhere. They are my two favorite parts of this job. And I think the most excited I am about the cross-country lecture tour this year is that I do get to visit some places I had never been before. And I do get to speak to what are going to be some really smart people. And I'm sure they're going to have great questions, and I'm sure we're going to have great discussions. And I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Awesome. And you can, of course, follow our social media feeds, follow our e-updates, follow our website to find out when Silas will be having a speaking engagement near you. And then you should do everything in your power to get there. And some point later in the year, we'll be doing a couple of these on our YouTube channel. And so those will be open, of course, to everybody. And we will let you know when those are going to happen. Our final question. We could not let this interview go by without asking this one. It is February. It is, of course, Black History Month. I wanted to ask you for your reflections on that, both generally, but I think also specifically as an engineer, what this month means to you and what your hopes are for it.
Yeah. The easiest way to answer this question, I guess, is to talk about me, because I think it's, one of the things I think I've been either good at or bad at, depending on who you would ask, is that there's a superficial me that everybody knows, but not a lot of people know much about how I got to here. And I'm not going to give you much more, but I will say that there are some things that have sort of shaped my life and shaped the way that I think about Black History Month and what it means to be Black in this industry. And so, I am 54 years old. I'm born 3 years after the Civil Rights Act is passed, which means that my parents grew up during Jim Crow as Southern Blacks whose families migrated to the North for jobs and opportunity. My parents lived a completely different life than me. I don't even understand some of the things that they went through because I've never had to go through them. But I am reminded all of the time of aspects of their upbringing that have been told to me over and over and over again as cautionary tales. When I was born in the middle of the Detroit race riots of 1967, third day of the 5-day riots. They had shut down the city. My father couldn't actually get in. He was out of town, and they diverted him so that he could not actually see me born. My mother almost gave birth in an ambulance because the checkpoints, because of curfews, made it such that the ambulance had to be stopped every block to check to make sure that there really was a pregnant woman in there. And then we were off. And so, I spent my first few years in the Midwest. And before moving to New Hampshire, but like my earliest memories of moving to New Hampshire at 10 years old are, the day in the first year that we were there that a brick was thrown through our window in a small suburban town in the Northeast. What did that mean? I didn't know at 10 years old, but I was starting to find out. As a junior engineer in Boston, in my very first job, I was nearly arrested leaving a job site in Beacon Hill at 9 o'clock in the morning for just walking by myself and being a 6'4", dark-skinned guy in a sweatshirt, as described to me while I was being handcuffed on the back of a police car by the policeman who was doing it, that the burglaries were described as a tall black man in a gray sweatshirt. Yeah. Whatever. Today I have an expectation that if I try to get a cab at night, not going to be successful. That if I'm walking toward a white person on the Washington, D.C. streets, that they will either clutch their belongings or just cross the street, because you can't tell anything about me from 100 yards away. That if I give a presentation at a conference, even in our own profession, someone will tell me how well-spoken I am at some point, and I will just have to grin and bear that. It's often that I feel responsible for trying to promote equality and equity in a culture, in this case, an engineering culture, with a history where it shouldn't be my responsibility to tell you that I want to be equal. And so, that I think that's sort of the background that gets me here. So I guess, a general reflection, I guess I would try to paraphrase something that Barack Obama said his first term when, he was talking about the fact that, Black History Month is a recognition that we've gotten a long way, but that more needs to be done to fulfill what is essentially the pursuit for a reality in this country that approaches its promise. You can read the words of the Constitution. You can listen to all of the accolades of, a pursuit of happiness and all the other things. But, a reality has to eventually approach that. And as an engineer, I find because of that, I'm kind of drawn to what efforts there are to promote diversity and inclusion. And I root for situations where Black people in our industry can do things without the obvious appearance of having to be so much better than average to just be considered equal. And so I think that's sort of where I am on the reflections of Black History Month, that, I would look for more diversity, and, I could call it an issue for Blacks advancing better through the industry, but really it's a diversity across the board that I think is being chased through this sort of discussion.
I want to thank you for that answer. It was very complete, I feel like, and I hope it gave our viewers some insight both into your thinking and makes them think a little bit about what's happening in the industry generally right now. But that was fantastic. So thank you so much for that. You made it through the entire interview, all 10 questions. Again, I tell everybody that everybody makes it, but it's still an achievement. You should be proud of that. If you liked what you saw today, and I think you probably did because you're here at the end, again, click subscribe, click get notifications. We will, I promise, let you know every time we post something to our YouTube channel. So Silas, thank you again for being here today, and thank you for your thoughtful answers to all of our questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to do it. I'm sorry I'm not actually in Washington, D.C. and you got this blank white wall as my background as opposed to my normal, very colorful office background. So.
There might have been some great questions about the stuff on the walls, but we'll never know. The world is just going to have to wait to find out. But thank you, all our viewers, for sticking with us today, and we will see everybody with a brand new Director's Cut next week.